I'm having a conversation. You're in Pennsylvania, right?
That's right.
New Wilmington, and I see that that's quite a. Forgive me, who cares about the town? I'm speaking with the American composer Daniel Perttu, Finnish descent, so I tried hard to get that pronunciation. Dan, if I can call you Dan at this point.
Dan is fine, yes.
Dan is chair of the School of Music and an associate professor of music theory and composition, area head at Westminster College. And as I started at New Wilmington, I'm so intrigued by small college communities, and I presume that's what New Wilmington is, a small college. But
Yes.
but you're also very close to all these other cities, Canton, Akron, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. So that's kind of a nice place to be for a composer. Yeah.
Yeah, actually it is. It's sort of, I have easy access to Pittsburgh, an hour north of Pittsburgh, an hour east of Akron, and an hour and a half east of Cleveland. So it's my wife and I can get to the orchestra really whenever, whichever orchestra we want. So there's a whole host of orchestras around here. It's not just obviously Cleveland and Pittsburgh or Pittsburgh and Cleveland, however you want to order that.
Well spoken. Very
Yes.
diplomatic of you.
But first time was just alphabetical order. I don't play any favorites here. Um, but yeah, we also have some wonderful orchestras closer to where I live. The Butler Symphony Orchestra and the Youngstown Symphony and the Erie Philharmonic. So there are all sorts of wonderful things around here. Culturally, it's not out in the boondocks. You just have to drive a little.
Yeah, well, Santa Barbara, of course, has been fairly cultural for a long, long time. There's quite a history of that with the Music Academy of the West and so on. But, I'm an hour and a half away from Los Angeles. I like it that way. It's nice to be away from the megalopolis, but able to dip down when you want. What I really meant was that you have these compositional opportunities for
Hmm.
commissions and works and to approach all these various orchestras. And by the way, I love and I really mean that. I love the work of regional orchestras. Nobody talks about it. No, they don't. They get no publicity, and they're the ones that are keeping the whole structure afloat. Really, you mentioned Youngstown and other orchestras. So many conductors that I know that have beautiful positions with. I'm thinking of Michigan Philharmonic now, Nan Washburn with Michigan Philharmonic. A suburb of Detroit, right? I think, and yet a beautiful, vibrant musical activity. And I'm sure it's also a very vibrant life at Westminster College. You want to give me a little overview of a day in the life of the
Yeah.
chair?
Oh, yeah, well, that's complicated. But I will say Westminster's a small liberal arts college, but it has a really prominent school of music within the context of being a small college, around 1,200 undergraduates. So it's small, but we have about 73 or so music majors, music education, music performance, and regular bachelor of arts in music, and so we have a very prominent presence on campus. We have nearly 200 students in general involved in the School of Music in some capacity, and in ensembles or whatever. So it's a vibrant place to be. We have a lot going on culturally. We give a lot of concerts. We have guest artists in. We even had the Pittsburgh Symphony in last October. They're coming
Nice.
back in March. Yeah, so
That was a big event, I'm sure,
it was
for the whole
huge.
community. I
Yeah.
remember when I was a kid, the Los Angeles Philharmonic came up to Little Santa Maria, which is north of Santa Barbara, and the whole town turned out. It was just one of the biggest real cultural. Those people, I'm sure, to this day have never forgotten the day the Los Angeles Philharmonic visited. Oh, that's wonderful. And so you're busy teaching composition. You have probably a class of composition students and so on. But here's kind of my question. I know you mentioned in your we talked a little bit before this, but you mentioned in your kind of your liner notes or on your website that you had as a kid. I love this idea. It's a great analogy, really. That you had been fascinated by magic. Am I getting
Yes.
this right? And that music became composition in particular became your magic. Give me a little thing. How'd that all work? And where'd you start? Were you a pianist? Were you a clarinetist? Give me that whole story about how come you wound up as a composer.
Yeah, so it's an interesting, complicated story. Um, so I started as a pianist at the age of 5, and I I loved playing, but I actually what I loved to do more than to practice after a few years in was to make up my own stuff. So, um, and also though the magic stuff feeds into it because I loved fantasy books, and I loved The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings before it was made into the epic cinemas that it was made into, which are wonderful, but I loved them even before then, and loved some other fantasy books. And
You
but
must
I
be a
knew,
great father. You must be a great father for your two daughters. That's going to be great. Because
oh
one of you
yeah,
loves fantasy, you know.
yeah. I mean, the imaginative play that they get into, it's incredible already. So it's
Excuse me
great.
for interrupting. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's fine. They love My Little Pony right now, and that's its own fantasy realm. So,
They have a little fantasy pony. Come on, you got to explain that before we move on. What's the
oh,
pony?
there's a whole video series, there's a whole Netflix thing where you enter My Little Pony realm and stuff like that. So my girls love that. But yeah, so what I do, how I got into it was I music became my way of creating something magical, something that could move um, people emotionally and could have a profound effect on people's lives. And so as I was getting older, I was always interested in composition. I kept up my piano studies. I also I did. There was a trumpet in the family, so I took that up for a little bit. Played in the band until about 8th grade. But in 6th grade, actually, while I was still playing the trumpet, um, I became fascinated actually with the bassoon, and we or my band director needed a bassoonist.
Of course,
Um,
always. They always need a.
Yes, and I remember listening to one of the early Mozart piano, or one of the Mozart piano concertos. I believe it was actually the K466, the D minor. Um, and there was a prominent bassoon part in the second theme group, and I always thought, wow, I love the sound of that. And then I discovered, well, Mozart has a bassoon concerto. So, of course, I got to know that even before I could play it. And I also grew up listening to a lot of classical music. My mom loved it, and a lot of romantic composers, and also Mozart on old LPs. Although apparently vinyl's coming back now with something
Amazing.
which I
What is that?
completely completely don't understand, but I'm sure people will shoot me down for that. But in any case, yeah, listening to all that and then becoming familiar with all the wonderful orchestral music out there. I was also fascinated with, Sorcerer's Apprentice and Peter and the Wolf, and all those things that I listened to as a kid, and they all had these bassoon parts, and the bassoon was a lot of fun sounding. And if I played the bassoon, I could play in orchestras, and
The
so.
methodology is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I could do that on trumpet too, but everyone knows that trumpet parts are pretty boring in orchestras until later on. So at least with the bassoon, you could play more interesting parts from the beginning. And kept up with the bassoon. I even got into Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra when I was either in 9th or 10th grade, one of those. Um, and continued until I was a senior. I got to play in Severance Hall and perform on that stage, and and I even remember thinking at the time it's probably going to be all downhill from here. uh, so, but it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and met a lot of great people there, and even reconnected with some people now who are also in youth orchestra at the time, but I didn't know it. Um, so that was a great experience. But I also had um, already a sort of a tense relationship with composition because in the late 80s and 90s, a lot of the new music I was exposed to, I went to Cleveland Orchestra concerts with my family. Um, it was an aesthetic that was not something that I was terribly interested in writing in. And So because of that, even though I could have pursued composition more, and I wish I had, I have a lot of regrets about this now. Um, I actually didn't, and I focused a lot more. I mean, I focused on the bassoon, I focused on the piano, but I also focused a lot on my academics because a lot of academic areas interested me. And so I actually went to college with the intention of not necessarily being a musician. I thought, well, maybe, I don't know, law school or something like that. Um, and I went to Williams College, a liberal arts college, in part because, um, well, I fell in love with the school. Also, academically, it's top notch, the best liberal arts college in the nation, according to U.S. News. And for whatever that's worth,
Go ahead.
um,
How you pop out the quotes? Go ahead. Sorry.
but
Also, by
that,
the way, you've given away. You may continue in a moment, but you've given away tons of stuff to me about that we're going to talk about later in the conversation. The bassoon thing. Now I know. Now I know. You know what I'm going to talk. What we're going to talk about.
oh
Go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
there's some teasers in here for sure. So yeah, so I went away to college and started my first semester. I didn't even take any music courses. And I thought, and then I realized, well, I was missing it way too much. And I made it into the Berkshire Symphony out there, which is a half professional and half student orchestra, or not half student, but mostly professional and some student orchestra, which was an incredible experience. The level of music making, playing alongside my bassoon teacher there, was amazing. And so I had uh, so many experiences at Williams that then just sucked me back into music. And um, I did a lot of composition on the side, but didn't study that much of it really until graduate school because I still had a lot of internal turmoil about how am I going to produce music at this time and of this era. Um, and
That
so
is so.
then,
Let me just interrupt for a
yeah,
second. That what you have just said is so fascinating to me. First of all, the true confessions and Freudianism of it all. But
yeah,
I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking.
it's fine.
But the idea of having a real conflict, if I understood you correctly, about going into music because you just plain didn't like the stuff you were that was being composed at the time, right? Have I understood that correctly? And it was like, well, why should I be why? So that's quite a doubt. And then the other thing is, so many musicians, you're not alone, but so many other musicians have that moment where they have to say, what am I going to make a living at this or what? Maybe law school's a good idea. Dad, should I be a doc? My dad begged me to be a dentist. And of
Yes,
course, never, never, never. But the other part of my brain says, oh, it would have been so much easier.
it should have been.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it would
there
have
you go.
been so
Sorry.
much easier.
So,
No, it's absolutely true. And then along that, when I was at Williams too, they had a lot of the emphasis on the scholarship of music was really, really strong. And so I considered musicology for a while there. I also became the conductor of the student orchestra, which wasn't the Berkshire Symphony, but it was the Williams Student Symphony. And being the conductor of that, I became very interested in conducting. So I had a lot of interests, and I hated the idea that I had to figure it all out. So in such a short amount of time. At the same time, I also took a major in English because I was interested in literature. And so my outcome after college, my goal was either going to be graduate school in music, wasn't sure was it going to be conducting or composition, wasn't sure, or perhaps maybe teaching of some sort, maybe teaching English. That was a possibility, or the law school thing. Those were sort of my three things swimming around in my head. So leaving college was a weird experience. I'd applied for a bunch of different things. The story gets really complicated and murky. Suffice it to say, let me just say this.
you're so dramatic. I love it. Very murky and complicated.
It
It's
did.
great.
Yeah, so I ended up at Kent State University near home, um, partly because I went there to get a teaching certification, but then in English, and then ended up getting a fellowship in music. So switched back to music.
Well, I see now. It really was rather complicated and
It was
conflicted.
it was complicated and conflicted, and then pursued masters in conducting. Um, Happened to get a double major in that and bassoon at the same time, and also graduate work, and then finally my master's in composition. So that's how that all happened. And then I once again went, considered different doctoral programs, and got a full ride to Ohio State in composition for my doctorate.
And
And that's
by then the deal was sealed, right? I hope
yeah,
from what you said. And also, you really stole another question from me, and it's about a particular work we will, I promise, we're going to discuss here in a minute of yours that we're looking at. We're kind of doing an overview of the recordings that we have of your music, chamber music, and a wonderful orchestral piece. But the question is, if you're a composer, especially if you start going into large forms, like orchestral forms, of course you're going to have to be doing some conducting and joyously too. You know what I mean. It's not a
yeah,
task; it's a joy to be able to conduct your own music. So yeah, you answered that question for me. So you have had conducting experience. That's great. That's wonderful. Now, what
yeah.
about what's the last convolution of your story before we dip into your music?
Yeah, so I finally got on the right path during, graduate school, and I knew that's ultimately okay. This is what I have to do, come hell or high water, um,
Yeah, that's the
because
way.
musicology wasn't for me. Conducting, I still enjoy, but I still, more importantly, was I had to create, and that's what I needed to do. So.
And by the way,
Um,
as a conductor, I have my little in the back of my head. It's like I am really recreating,
mm,
and there's that little nudge of disappointment. But I'm a lousy composer anyway, so it's perfectly okay. And besides, I'm old; it doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah, so then after that, I got my first job as a professor in the University of Louisiana in Lafayette, which was a wonderful job. There's a great faculty down there. Um, but due to politics in the state legislature, the position was actually frozen for renewal. So I was applying for other jobs, and there are other reasons. So I was applying for other jobs just to be safe, and then I ended up with a job at Westminster College. I signed the contract, and then a week later, my position down in Louisiana was unfrozen, but it's too late. Um, I moved up to Westminster. It turned out to be for the best, though, because there
Oh,
were a lot of opportunities for my wife in terms of her career. She ended up getting the orchestra director position here because she's also a string person and a conductor. She's
see,
violinist.
the stuff I didn't know. Thank you for telling me that. So it is a musical family indeed. Also, isn't this closer to home, if you will?
It is closer to home, so that also worked out
And
well.
we are talking about different cultures. Let's be clear. Different sections of the country have completely different cultures. So you did the right thing. Okay, I'm encouraging you on this.
Yeah, and so I've been at Westminster since 2008, and that brings us up to sort of now.
Okay. Well, good, because I think we need to be here and now, and we're going to start talking about some of this music that I've had an opportunity to listen to. Naturally, I really am impressed with the orchestral piece. To Spring, an overture. From 2017, it's on a Navona CD called Tomorrow's Air: Contemporary Works for Orchestra and Large Ensemble. And this I find is so cute. It's dedicated to your two daughters. That's very sweet, and inspired in a way, I guess, by Blake. Although I think that's kind of secondary somehow from what I got out of it. Am I in trouble yet? Go ahead.
No, it's very interesting. So, yeah, this piece was commissioned by the Lakeland Civic Orchestra, northeast of Ohio, Cleveland. Um, and the conductor there is also a good friend of mine. And he said he needed a piece for concert opener for his spring concert there. and he wanted on a spring theme. And so the Blake poem certainly was something um, to lash onto. I love that particular ode, but also, and there comes my literary background there too. Um, but also, it ended up being right around the time when I was composing it. Annika was born, and Fiona was on her way, and
Love the
um,
names.
yeah, thank you. And so it worked out perfectly to be able to dedicate it to them because it was a rebirth. You know, it was birth and rebirth in some senses.
Mm.
So
Let me just let me jump in with a little quote from Blake that I
yeah,
thought really kind of did it. Quote: "Let us taste thy morn and evening breath. Scatter thy pearls upon our love-sick land that mourns for thee, as in mourning for spring to arrive." And I studied in Britain, and I know how we longed for spring. Let me tell you, beautiful
yes,
poetry, of course, and it's a wonderful big. Let's talk about it from a big heroic sort of piece. Your orchestration is really big. I love the use of horns and brass. You know, those kind of heroic themes. What else did I say? Lots of nature imagery, or am I all wet on that
no, no.
one?
No, that is absolutely true. Yeah. So the heroism of the horns, the brass, and then yes, the natural. I've been inspired by nature um, ever since I was young. I love it,
and
and so
and also
that,
fantasy. So I'm not going to let you get away with this. You know what? This is Hobbit. I'm sorry. This is springtime in Hobbit land. Lots of fantasy and orchestral fanfare and all of that. I thought I don't. I know you might not want me to use this word cinematic, but I
no,
found it
it's
very very narrative, cinematic, and well fantasy like. Wonderful.
no. Well, that I don't mind if you use that word. I mean, I'm unapologetic about it. I mean, John Williams is. Um, very successful composer, and he's a very good
And I
composer.
was going to say, and not bad. Yep.
um, and I'm not trying to imitate
No.
his sound here, but the fact that there are certain sort of triumphant tropes out there, music is a web of meaning, and so composers digest what's out in the culture, and then they filter it through what is meaningful to them, and then create a composition based on that. And so there are certain sort of musical memes that are created in our culture, whether we want to admit it or not. And so those memes have connotations. I mean, and we could talk endlessly about the different connotations of various musical memes. But certainly it wasn't lost on me when, you know, when some of those things came to my mind as I was composing. It's all it's inspirational, but it's also intentional. So yeah, so there's a
And
John Williams.
by the way, just to help you to ease your
Yeah,
something or other, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's great. It's wonderful. This style of composition, this style of color,
yeah,
this narrative. You have sequences, you have moments. The imagination runs wild. It's great. So you know, here for John Williams and all the rest of it. I'm thinking of Corn Gold, among
yeah,
others. That it, you know, it's kind of called, and I'm not categorizing your piece necessarily, but this kind of cinematic style is magnificent. I mean, Corn Gold was an opera composer. This is what I meant. Your piece is so narrative and so natural. It's great. But now let's move on to something a little more esoteric.
sure,
The piano sonata.
yeah,
What brought?
yeah,
Give me the story of the piano sonata. But let me do the ad though first. This is from a CD, another Navona release, 2018. Nancy J. DeSalvo is the pianist, colleague or how you know or
yes,
uh-huh.
Holly,
And it has other composers on the CD. It's called Small Stones Modern Piano Music. It's wonderful.
yeah.
Um, let's see, and this is the sonata, the piano sonata you have said in your program notes was inspired by your visit to Stonehenge go. It's time to tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I visited Stonehenge in 2009, and it was stunning. It's you see pictures, but the pictures don't do it justice. It's the experience of being there. We were there actually at a time when there weren't a lot of crowds. It was fairly empty. I'm not sure how that came about, but it did.
Very
So
lucky, very lucky.
yeah,
Yes.
I reveled in that fact,
Because you
and
can feel the. I've been there when I was during my student days in London. Would take
yeah,
those trips, and when there's no one around, you feel the presence of whatever that energy, whatever it is, the energy there, the thousands of years of something or other. Go ahead,
yeah,
sorry.
yes, absolutely. Honestly, it did. It felt a bit like the Stones whispered the theme to me. Now, some people might be thinking, "Oh my God."
Oh, but it's so wonderful. I love that. Stick to that story. The Stones whispered it to
Uh,
me.
yeah, they did though. That's the opening theme, um, that deep, sort of ponderous opening to the sonata. And but the sonata it's a dense piece. And it's not this vivid expression of exuberance and joy at the return of spring. Instead, it's this sort of this mysterious and often turgid piece at times. And those were the vibes I got there. And it's because of the setting. It was very dark in times, or it was very um, hard to discern what the nature of that energy actually was. Now we're back to magic. What kind of magic was it? Was it?
Ooh, well
Was
connected.
it?
Very well connected. I'm going to read you something from the Misterioso movement that I in my
Sure.
notes. Low, slow figure opens, tries to climb out of doom and gloom. I get this sort of emerging, Stonehenge is deep. You know what I'm saying? You can feel there's other stuff down there. I'm sure when they do the flyovers, there are other structures. I'm sure. I guess they've even discovered other structures now. But and by the way, there's nothing wrong with people say, oh well, why are you dealing with those kind of moods and energies? Well, duh, because we're human beings. It's part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Excuse me for jumping in, but go ahead, press on a bit. How about that Misterioso movement?
Yeah. In some senses, I love the second movement. In some respects, the most. Although the third movement we can talk about, but because it really does capture the. Um, I was after a very, very ancient feel, so there's a lot of open fifths in it, um, and and a lot of parallel fifths, to try to convey this ancient feel. But um, it also the timbres, the tone colors they're very deep, very dark, um, and I just had this sense of sort of dark awe when I was there. And it's a little hard to put into words. It's sort of ineffable. So that's the best I can do.
But I can help you out of this one too. I'll be sending you my bill as your therapist shortly. But obviously, you are chasing that Finnish root. You're
Oh,
chasing Finnish roots, aren't you? I mean, what I mean by Finnish roots, the Druids. Who knows where they came from? But the invasion of all that wonderful stuff from history and literature. And by the way, for us in music, especially if we're conductors, which you are clearly, as well, history. We have to know the history. Period. That's all there is to it, or we can't possibly interpret. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the piano sonata is yet another example of I think, of your kind of looking into, and it was right, the journey to Stonehenge and other historic places, that one of which we're going to bring up shortly. But there's something. I mean, I'm kind of vaguely Scandinavian, the Swede part of my family, and there's something very alluring about. Britain kind of really held me in awe as a student. So
well, yeah, the Vikings obviously. came there a lot. Now, to what extent the Finns were part of that is a little
But you
unclear,
know what I
but
mean, that kind of
Finland was part
Scandinavian, that
yeah,
kind
and
of
Finland's part of
Scandinavian thing.
Sweden, and we also have some Swedish names in our ancestry, so it's all mixed up in there.
Yeah.
But in Britain and in Scandinavia too, the runes, and there's even, I believe, Finnish rune singing, and
Mm.
um, I'm just fascinated by runes. I made up my own alphabets and stuff when I was a kid, you know. Um,
Uh-oh, there's the magic coming in again, right? His secret
I,
alphabet at age 8 in mysterious runes and symbols and
Yeah, maybe around 11, but yeah, okay.
that's even more scary, but go ahead.
I was eccentric. I got out, but I didn't I didn't get out with society maybe enough. But yeah, in any case, I always thought the runes, the ancient epics, the ancient stories, I was fascinated by those. And so I think all of that comes to the fore in that piano sonata.
And by the way,
Yeah.
it's not silly at all. If I'm anywhere close to where you are on this, those ancient runes and markings and the Sumerians and all of that, that's where all the answers are. You know,
Yeah.
the answers are there in those little chunks of clay with their mysterious symbols.
Well, and I did see something online. We look at our emojis now. What are we back to? Hieroglyphics?
Yeah. And by the way, I loathe those stupid smiley faces. Okay, now so we're still dipping deep into this kind of not to say obsession, but real interest that you have in that part of the world, maybe let's say just sort of generically, the Store of Trotternish for
Mhm.
bassoon. Now I know you played bassoon. That made a big difference. I had no idea when I listened to this piece. This is a piece for bassoon and piano. By the way, who do you remember the musicians? I couldn't find the bassoonist. Do
Me.
you remember? Oh, you really? Okay, that
I'm
makes
the
sense.
bassoonist on that, and the pianist is Nancy DeSalvo again.
Still, okay, thanks. Why didn't that
Yeah.
occur to me? Uh, let's see,
It's
what did
okay.
I write here? Well, first we've got to describe this thing, this Store of Trotternish, and it's
Yeah.
in where, Scotland or something? Where is it?
Yeah, Scotland, the Isle of Skye.
The Isle
Uh,
of Skye. Go ahead, you tell us. I'm looking at a picture and I can't believe it, how rocky formations can
yeah.
come
So
about
this
like
is a
that.
150 foot, I think, 150-foot pinnacle on the Isle of Skye that looks out. You can, once you get up to it, you can look out and you see even water and other mountains, and it is um, incredibly dramatic. Not a lot of trees around. Most of the trees are much lower, so a lot of green, and then rocks. And these rocks are just very um, pointy and jagged and ominous and threatening. But they're like natural standing stones in some ways. So they also, like Stonehenge, they capture this mystery and this sort of magical um, ethos. But because they're natural, they're even in some respects even more. Um, there's just an added layer of depth to it. So when I was there, I was obviously deeply inspired by it. My wife and I took a hike up to the Store of Trotternish, and it started off being very misty and atmospheric. Go figure, you're in Scotland. Uh, but then it cleared up later,
Hmm.
and then the sun came out, and we got some incredible pictures. And it's not just the Store Trotternish, but there are other of these pinnacles and stuff like that.
They're natural obelisks really, and you can't tell me the ancients or whoever inhabited nearby even didn't use that as some kind of special place. It's unavoidable, the magic and mystery and mysticism of those structures, natural
Oh
structures.
my God, yeah! If I were a high priest or a chieftain or something, I would use it.
For good or ill? That's my
Yeah.
question. Well, let's just have a quick look at this wonderful bassoon. Well, now I'm going to have to go back and go, oh, it's Dan playing. I see. Oh, not bad, not bad. Okay, I didn't realize. Give me an overview of these the three movements: maestoso, lento, presto. The presto is wonderful. Wow,
Oh, thank
I
you.
really enjoyed the presto. Twinkling, energized as a um, kind of fast dance, rhythmically full of personality stretch. That's the presto, the last move. So it's wonderful, especially the use of the instrument of bassoon, the way you do naturally, having played it all these years. So I hope it didn't spoil your story.
No, no, yeah, it was the first movement starts sort of it goes across the entire compass of the bassoon, which is meant loosely to convey the vertical um, sort of structure of the Stora Trotternish, but there's a lot of grand piano chords, of course. It's a, but it has this sort of Dorian Phrygian um,
I
flavor to
wondered, yeah, and I wondered if there were actual modes involved or whether it was just, as you suggest, kind of a flavor or
it's a
a
yeah,
conflation of some kind, you know.
yeah, it's a flavor, but yeah, I do use the modes pretty consciously. In fact, I love the modes, and I use them a lot in all these works.
Actually, yeah, now that you mention it, because I was thinking even pentatonic. Am I in trouble yet somewhere? Not on the not on the bassoon sonata, but somewhere I can't quite remember where. Maybe Gloman or something. Anyway, yeah,
Mhm.
that kind of
Hirajoshi, yeah, Hirajoshi pentatonic and Gloman, that's right. And yeah, and I just use I love modal writing. I love the mysterious quality of the Phrygian mode. Of course, in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the Phrygian mode was the most sort of profound and mysterious mode, and for obvious reasons. I mean, you start with that half step, and it gives at least it gives me chills just whenever I listen to it. I think it's one of the greatest modes, and then Brahms uses it in his Fourth Symphony, and there's so many wonderful things about, or Vaughan Williams. The Phrygian mode has such a rich, wonderful history. The Tallis Fantasia, Thomas Tallis. Um, Tallis Fantasia being one of the greatest pieces I think ever written. But yeah, so I love the modes and I love the mystery they convey, and so I use them prominently in this bassoon sonata. And yeah, and then the second movement is meant to convey more of the mist, and I'm very much after this sort of,
I see temperament and color.
yeah.
You know, you use a lot of and it's kind of soliloquy, right? Somehow for bassoon in this movement,
Mhm. Absolutely.
struggling,
Yeah.
plotting, and so on. Yeah.
And
Okay.
then the last,
Yeah. How
sorry.
about the presto? How about the presto? Because by the way, the last few notes are brilliant in the presto. That is a beauty. What a way to end that piece. It just jumps off the page. I hope I didn't spoil it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so the Presto, I wanted to capture, so there were a lot of streams and water was,
Hmm.
you know, around there, part of the hike I was on, and I wanted to capture some of the liquid aspects of that environment. It's a very moist kind of place. I don't like that word, but it's misty and there's a sky is an island, so that liquid scent aside of things is important too. But then you have the obelisk there, sort of in the midst of it. It gets, these are not literal
Of
representations
course not.
of the landscape. It's an essence that is filtered through me, and then it's an impression conveyed in music.
By the way, that's the one of the best descriptions of what a composer does. You know, and you are I wanted to say I had a better word, medium in a sense for all the
Hmm.
stuff we've been talking about, the vibe
Yeah.
of a place. You know, we have gone way over. I'm sorry to say. Do you want to give me just a quick one about Gloman, this fantasy for flute and piano,
Okay.
which I had a good chance to listen to. It too. I love narrative of any kind. It's so important, musically, literarily, or otherwise.
Sure.
Just tell me because it's almost 10 minutes long. This piece, isn't
Yeah.
it? The Gloman.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fantasy. Um,
Oh yeah,
well,
really? Oh, now, boy, you're stuck with this. You've been fantasizing for your whole life apparently. Excuse me. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, yeah, it's a again, it's a way to escape. So Gloaming, of course, has always been a time of day that I I've always loved. Whether it's a summer warm Gloaming or one during the winter solstice when that happens at 4 in the afternoon. Um, but it's a I this piece really just captures the essence of that sort of liminal space between afternoon and evening, and it's or evening and night or whatever, and it's more again about capturing colors and hues with the musical form. I feel like it's more abstract than the others in some respects, but it doesn't have the same kind of density and heaviness of the piano sonata. I think it's a lighter, more impressionistic piece.
Yes, and then let me see if I can get in trouble here because I found a kind of very Native American sort of temperament to it. Was there anything there? There's a kind of the sound quality of the flute that you use, and the writing and the range, and maybe even an instruction. I don't know because I haven't seen the score, but something very simple. So, for the lack of another word, I was thinking Native American. It could be Native Norwegian for all, but you know what I mean.
Well, the reason why I think that's true, I actually love Native American flute music, and
Right.
so um, I was
That's what I
exposed.
heard. Yeah, that's for sure what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was exposed to various forms of it when I'd gone on trips out west when I was younger. So I loved
Beautiful
that.
piece. Okay, we got to wind it down. People have
Yeah.
already walked away from the viewer. I'm sure. No, I'm just kidding. I gave up trying to go along with the lemmings who say 7 minutes. Get it in, and get it over with. People can't possibly, they don't have the patience to listen. Well, so if people don't have the patience, they can skip through, they can quit, they can whatever. We just need to have our conversations. This one was a little went on a bit, but I wasn't expecting it at all. This kind of wonderful conversation. So Dan, thank you very much, and you also took us right into how a composer works in your many of your descriptions. So let's run it by. What I have done is had a look at several compositions of yours over 2 or 3 different CDs, compilation CDs. So this is a little different curve. I'm going to do it with another composer friend of mine soon too. But it's just been a wonderful kind of opportunity to have an overview of the wonderful orchestral talents. That's what I mean in terms of orchestration, imaginative workings, magic, as it were, fantasy, the creation of imagery and color and all that's beautiful orchestral piece. Let me see if I can find the title. Help. Give me the title of the orchestral piece. To Spring. To
Yes.
Spring.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And then we had a look at the piano sonata. Any others of the piano sonatas? Is that the first piano sonata so far?
That is the first. I'm currently finishing up a piano concerto called Elven Dream. So dreams of the elves, of course.
I
And
read that somewhere. I'm so glad you brought it up. Let's talk about the future. What's going on? Okay, Elven Dreams. Yeah. So do you have it lined up for a performance anywhere yet? Or?
yeah, that'll be premiered by Orchestra Omaha with Tammy Miller on piano.
Oh yeah.
And uh, after that, I am starting to put together a consortium for a second piano concerto on the planets with pianist Jeffrey Beagle.
A
So,
second concerto of what? Based on the planets? Piano concerto based on the planets or what?
yeah, so this one would be based on the planets, and obviously there are other pieces, Holst, and others based on the planets, but no piano concerto that I'm aware of based on this idea. So the idea is to try to give the musical world something on that theme in the form of a piano concerto.
It's a great idea. That's
So
a great topic and a great idea. And yeah, surely there's more.
those are well. I think that's enough, don't
No,
you?
I think I asked earlier. Well, whether I should ask you about an opera, because of course, operas are like, give me half of my life, and I'll compose this magnificent opera, and it'll be played twice. Thanks a lot for the encouragement.
Well, yeah. Opera, maybe eventually. I don't
Maybe it
know.
just doesn't speak to you. Do you think?
Well, now the quote "sing to me" came into my mind, but isn't that from the Phantom of the Opera? Um,
I'm just a classical guy. Got
yeah.
me. Sounds good.
But I
Something
don't
will
know.
pop. Something will pop. In other words, basically, you don't go hunting. Stuff jumps into your face. So maybe.
Exactly. But
Before the nursing home, something will jump into your face and say, "Write me, I'm an opera."
maybe so.
Okay, we've got to end. Wonderful chat with composer Daniel Perttu, chair of the School of Music, associate professor of music theory, and so on and so forth. Composition, School of Music at Westminster College in Wilmington. I got all that right, I hope. And obviously busy composing and raising a family. What a great pleasure again to be able to have you tell us. I mean, a lot of my viewers are fellows, other professional musicians, but it's always so interesting about what the process is, how people come to where they are in terms of an artistic life. So thanks again, Dan, very much. We'll see you another time, huh?
Okay. Thank you
Sure.
so much.
Bye bye.